All right, Congressman.
Great. Well, thank you, Trish, for organizing this. And as we all know, I mean, Zoom, if nothing else, it's kind of an efficient way to connect people. And certainly through the pandemic, over communicate. You can never over communicate, and certainly that's true of so many other aspects of what people are dealing with right now. And Crumbling Foundation certainly is a persistent problem that predates, obviously, quite a bit, the pandemic. I was thinking about Tim and George Colley. I think we first met in, I think it was 2015 or maybe early 2016 when this thing really burst into the public domain. I mean, it had been around for a number of years, but that's when I think people realized they weren't alone and that there was something systemic that was going on. It wasn't just sort of a bad luck, individual situation that was there. And on Saturday, I was in Wellington watching the Ellington Ridge condominium units begin the process of lift, clean, and replace. I was reminded of Bruce Springsteen's song, The Rising, because we were there watching the jack literally lift this units. There was probably, I don't know, a dozen units in this building. It was quite a sight, actually, to see it sort of going up in the air. And again, like so many other people can attest, I mean, the emotional reaction of unit owners, to see that there really finally was, an end to this, that was certainly coming towards them. So in terms of, the federal state of play, as some of you know, I mean, we, had some progress, even going back to 2016, 2017, at least in terms of getting the tax code and the Internal Revenue Service to recognize the situation as an event, which triggered a property casualty loss deduction, which is money in people's pockets. It's not sort of upfront funding, to actually pay for a house, but certainly, I know over the years in terms of dealing with constituents who took advantage of that decision by IRS. I mean, as I said, it put money in people's pockets. In 2017, when the tax code the law was changed, unfortunately, the property casualty loss was truncated, and actually, starting this year, people are not going to be able to take advantage of it because of that change in the tax law. They can't even go back and redo their taxes pre 2017. And obviously the persistent question, which I get asked all the time, is, when can the federal government actually step up and help fund and, the actual repairs of homes? And now we know, obviously, this problem is not just residential real estate. It's affecting public buildings. Elementary school that had to be torn down is another place where, again, the request comes from the district in terms of whether the federal government is going to step in and be able to help address that. So later this week in Pittsburgh, President Biden is going to be announcing an infrastructure initiative, which is, in my opinion, this is real. I mean, there was no question. I was on a caucus call today where the chairman of the infrastructure committee was already laying out the planning for moving legislation. Normally you think of infrastructure as just roads and bridges and rail, which it normally is, transportation infrastructure, but there is going to be a housing piece to the infrastructure bill. And we know that because in July of last year, in the prior Congress, we actually passed an infrastructure bill which included housing as part of the package, as well as school building repairs that was also included in the infrastructure bill. So Megan O'Sullivan, who's on the call here, can confirm the fact that right now we are very focused in terms of the infrastructure bill as an opportunity for kind of a horse that we can jump on to get some help. Number one, we want to get the property casualty loss deduction reinstated, and we have that language written, and we have support from different members. It actually got through in last year's passage of the infrastructure bill. The property casualty loss was included, so it did clear the House. And again, with the fact that we now have the White House supporting this measure, I think we're in better shape. Number two, in terms of school construction, again, the bill that we passed last year included funding and we worked with the town of Tolland to sort of get the language right, to help the community, defray some of the costs of having to rebuild a school building. I don't have to tell any of you that there's definitely, I think, indications that other school buildings and municipal buildings and community facilities are also experiencing crumbling foundations. So getting that into the infrastructure bill, I think, again, is not just dealing with that one Birch Grove Elementary School, but also other facilities that may, again, become victims of crumbling foundations. And lastly, in terms of residential real estate, in last year's bill, we got funding through HUD into the HUD piece of the housing infrastructure, which again, Congressman Larson and myself got language in there that made it clear that those funds, when they go to the states, which is the way the legislation is designed, that there is specific language in the law that states that reconstruction of homes that have been infected with pyrrhotite are a permissible use for those funds. Okay, and we're talking millions of dollars. Again, we've obviously got to make sure this language stays in the bill, gets through the House, gets through the Senate, and the president signs it into law. Then it's going to come to, that particularly that last piece is going to come to Connecticut. And we just got to make sure that HUD funding goes to where the language of the bill intends, which is namely to provide more assistance to CIFSIC, the captive insurance company. And again, we've been in touch with Mike Magalaris, on the legislation. He's very aware of where we're going with this, totally supports it. And I think, again, that will provide a lot more robust assistance than sort of some of the initiatives over the last few years that have been helpful, but really don't get to the heart of this and don't really deal with the magnitude and scope of the problem, which we know is much bigger than the 300 homes that have been already fixed as a result of CIFSIC. And when I talked to Mike on Saturday at the Rising, he said that's pretty much where CIFSIC is right now. It's about 300 homeowners who have benefited from it. I want to end by just basically saying, Tim Heim, who was there at the very beginning when it looked extremely grim, brought together the grassroots. He was the catalyst that got the grassroots moving, and to the place where we are today. We're close to $100 million has been spent by the state of Connecticut through CIFSIC. He did it without lobbyists or super PACs or any of the stuff that normally moves the legislative bodies these days. And I just want to tip my hat to him and to all the folks that really were part of that effort. And it really, that is not easy to do. But let's face it, we got more work to do ahead, and we will keep you posted in terms of the initiatives that I've just described. And I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you so much, Congressman. Does any of our speakers have any questions or comments for Congressman Courtney? And anyone on the line, if you have any questions, you can raise your hand. I have one question for you, Congressman. For folks who receive funding to help them repair their foundation, are they taxed on that?
No, well, thank you for asking that question, because when CIFSIC started to award dollars for people to fix their homes, the view was that was just compensation and not taxable income, which has always historically been shielded from any tax liability. Unfortunately, there was a legal opinion that was kind of rattling around there that said that it actually would be treated as taxable income, which really would have been just a huge rabbit punch to the homeowners. Yeah. So again, we worked with Mike and got an opinion from the IRS that just completely foot stomped that question so that it is not taxable. And Megan O'Sullivan, who's on the call here, was very helpful in terms of that effort, in terms of going back and forth with IRS to settle that issue once and for all.
Excellent. We have a question from someone that says, what's the income level to be considered for the HUD funding?
So I don't have the exact numbers. Again, we've gotten the use of some HUD funds for testing. We were able to get that out of community development block grant funds a number of years ago. Frankly, I think the state should have availed itself of more dollars, but that's another topic we'll discuss some other time. But the bottom line is, the questioner is right. That is not available to all homeowners. You have to, it's a means tested program. But I will tell you this, in the town of Coventry, they administered the federal dollars that were allowed for testing, and they exhausted the full amount. I mean, it was, you know, I don't know, it was about $5,000 per test, and there was $250,000. They went through it. I mean, there were plenty of homeowners that qualified for the HUD funding, and the same thing's happening in Vernon right now. I just talked to a gentleman who lives on Bolton Road in Vernon, who, you know, his house was tested through HUD. He was found to have, you know, bad pyrite, and he would qualify to have his house fixed. And as Mike Magalera says, every dollar that the state does not have to spend on a HUD eligible homeowner for concrete remediation is a dollar they can use to help another homeowner who's not, you know, who's doesn't fall under those guidelines.
Perfect. We have another question. When will there be a surcharge on every yard of concrete poured in Connecticut to be used to fund CIFSIC?
Well, I'm going to, you know, defer to my state legislative friends. I mean, again, they did great work in terms of getting the Healthy Homes funding started, which was on, you know, insurance policies, as I think probably everybody knows. And again, I know Tim was part of that effort at the state capitol. You know, I think that getting a reliable revenue stream, and I, again, talked to Mike on Saturday about this, you know, a lot of people are trying to, you know, come up with ideas about ways of trying to enlarge CIFSIC's fund to, you know, be able to help more homes. And, you know, I had not heard that idea before. I mean, it's an interesting concept,
Yeah.
but it's, you know, we need to spread the cost. I mean, and I think that, you know, those kinds of ideas are very much consistent with that, which is really, when you think about it, that's what insurance is supposed to do. It's a whole nother topic.
Right. We do have another question here, which is condos were excluded from the HUD testing. Will the future HUD money include condos?
That's a great question. And the language that we included in the amendment and the infrastructure bill, which, as I said, was kind of like a test run because we you know, got it through committee, passed on the floor of the House. I don't think, you know, there was any sort of limitation language about condos. I mean, it was about housing. So if you want to, you know, contact or ping Megan in my office, Megan O'Sullivan at house.gov, mail.house.gov, you know, we can answer that question, or we'll circle back with you, Trish.
Okay.
I'll just jump in real quick, if that's okay, Congressman Courtney. But I think that it has to do with if the condo, how it's owned and how the foundation is owned, but we can send you more information on that.
Thanks, Megan.
Okay, and I have someone with her hand raised. That's going to be Lisa.
Hi there.
Hi, Lisa.
How are you?
Good.
Well, my question is, and I just put it in the chat. What is this, the status of declaring this a state, you know, a disaster, a state of disaster? And
Sure.
the reason for my asking is because I continue to try to work with the banks, and they offer nothing but a modification loan, which doesn't really help. It doesn't help solve the, you know, the problem of being upside down as far as being able to pay. It's going to cost us out of our pocket $50,000 just to cover the foundation cost. And in order for the bank to even, you know, listen in any way, you know, they're saying, well, is there a state of disaster? And so my question is, are you pursuing that? And if so, are you making the banks aware of this problem as well? Because every time I call, they have no idea about this topic at all. And I'm calling constantly.
So first of all, I would encourage you to contact Megan, who just posted her email address, because this question has come up. But, you know, again, as many people on this call know, when this problem first emerged, you know, under the FEMA law, it's the Stafford Act for disaster declarations. The way the law is designed, and it goes back to the 1970s, is a governor has to request disaster declaration. I mean, anytime there's a hurricane, you know, flooding, you know, any of that stuff. I mean, because they really don't want Congress trying to sort of, you know, be in charge of declaring disasters. It just would be, they need a sort of more organized system. So what the governor does is they organize all the information about, people's, what happened, and then they determine whether or not it falls under certain definitions of what is a disaster, whether it's a terrorist event, whether it's, a weather event, an earthquake, an explosion. And, so Governor Malloy ran this up the flagpole twice with FEMA and was rejected both times as not being a man-made event. And I know people can really, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people. I've talked to Governor Lamont, about whether or not they wanted to maybe sort of, run it up the flagpole again, and, we obviously now have some scientific expertise that maybe could give a fresh look at this. And frankly, if that would happen, that certainly would open the door to a lot more assistance, including bank financing, as you point out. So one thing we were able to do was to get sort of almost like an equivalent disaster treatment by the bank regulators in DC. So that's why I would like to have you maybe follow up with Megan to just sort of walk through exactly, what the banks are telling you, because Megan has spent quite a bit of time, with the Connecticut Banking Association and the federal bank regulators. And I think that would, if nothing else, I just would like to run the traps with you, Lisa, and sort of see if there's more we can do.
I'd appreciate it.
Okay, so I will add Megan's email address to that resource sheet that I send out at the end to everyone. Excellent. Any other questions for Congressman Courtney?
Yes, I would like to talk to him for just a moment here, if I could, Trish. This is Michelle.
Yes, Michelle. Yep.
First of all, I want to thank you for everything that you are doing. The work you've done for the folks in Connecticut is wonderful. And we have a number of people on the meeting tonight, and we'll be watching it later, from Massachusetts. And just to clarify for them that are listening, that the efforts that you're making on the federal level will include Massachusetts residents, not just Connecticut.
Absolutely. And, and again, we have certainly, myself and Congressman Larson have spent quite a bit of time talking to Congressman Neal, who represents the Western Mass area there, as well as McGovern. And I know the two senators are certainly aware of it, but frankly, I would encourage the Massachusetts listeners to, follow Tim Heim's example, be persistent, not nasty or obnoxious or anything like that, but just, make sure that people realize that this problem, it's like people are stranded, without normal sort of assistance with, homeowners insurance, et cetera. And I, as I said, I feel pretty good about the fact that the infrastructure bill will have provisions in it. And so far, as I said, we did sort of a practice run last year and really got no pushback from members of Congress in, Florida or California or other parts. I mean, they actually are very sympathetic when they hear the story, but having more voices from more states, we would welcome it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we have one more question, which is asking CIV6 status on when you're in the line waiting for approval or for one's place in line is very frustrating. Will there be better information coming in the future?
I mean, I would just say, we read CIV6 weekly updates religiously. And, when I talk to Mike, they obviously are anxiously hoping for another chunk of that bonding money to be released to keep, the conga line moving, in terms of home repairs that are happening out there. He apparently is also working with the treasurer's office to see if there's ways to leverage more funding using the Healthy Homes revenue stream. I mean, there's ways that we may be able, that he's working on to see whether we can sort of accelerate the use of those funds. And so I would just say stay tuned. I mean, it just, no one's given up, and persistence is the name of the game when you're talking about this issue.
Yeah, so perhaps if there's a way that the homeowners who are in line waiting could have a little more information, that might be helpful, just so that they know where their status
Right.
is the impression I'm getting here. Okay, fantastic.
Hey,
Right.
Trish, just real quick, Joe, I just wanted to say thank you for all your help and your hard work. It was actually August of 2015 when you were the first one at my house. And, you know, when I first started getting involved in this, I had signs made up that said actions speak louder than words. And, you know, almost 6 years later, you're still sitting in front of us and many victims advocating for us. And that means a lot to us. And I wanted to say thank you.
You're a good guy, and every one of these homeowners are good people, and they need help. And government should be there to step in and help.
Yeah, thank you.
And I have two more quick things in the chat. So as a follow-up to the previous question, the person says, well, you don't know if you're number 50 or number 500 in line. So I think maybe, I don't know if that's something to share back with Mike McGlaris.
We
But
will.
also, oh, I'm sorry.
We will. Thank you. That's good to know.
And the other question, has there been any progress with the extension of the existence of the Connecticut Funding Foundation Charter?
So it's my understanding, and there may be other people that are following the legislation in Hartford, but it's my understanding that they are talking about pushing out the sunset date of the program. And I think it's going to have a lot of support, certainly in North Central Connecticut with state legislators, but there might be, speakers later this evening that could handle that one.
Right. Excellent. Thank you so much, Congressman Courtney.
All right. Stay in touch. And as I said, we welcome the questions and please use our email.
Thank you so much. We'll do that. I'll pass that along.
Right.
All right. So now we're going to jump to Tim Heim. As Congressman Courtney was saying, Tim has been an advocate, learned how to be a lobbyist, all sorts of things to help with this issue. And he's also from the Connecticut Coalition Against Crumbling Basements. Tim, thank you for coming and share your story with everyone.
Well, Trish, thank you for having me. Thank you to Bentley Memorial Library and the town of Bolton. It's been a long time since we all got together. It's my first Zoom call. So it's exciting to see how it all works. And it's actually very convenient than trying to set up a meeting at the Ellington High School auditorium. So hello, everyone. It's nice to see everybody. And my name's Tim Heim with the Coalition Against Crumbling Basements. As Joe had mentioned earlier, he was the first one at my house back in August of 2015. Found out from George Colley's first story on July 22nd of 2015 that I was a victim of crumbling foundations. And so what we did is, it's, as all of you know, it's very intense emotions. It's an emotional roller coaster. Throughout the first 6 months of finding out that I had it, organized meetings, had my first meeting at the Stafford Senior Center, where I mentioned that I was thinking about forming a coalition, and a young lady by the name of Cheryl Kranick raised her hand and said, I can help you with a Facebook page and a website. And she was at my house the next week, and we started from there. And, we had a lot of support. My neighbors, Nancy and Clyde Smith, we had a lot of support. George Colley, obviously we couldn't have done it without his expert investigative reporting. And we also, with the meetings, it just snowballed, and we started getting more and more traction, and people started listening. Senator Anwar, Senator Austin, all the representatives, Curry, Vail, Delanicki, Representative Tim Acker, they were all really behind us on a bipartisan support level, which is what we needed. So we had a lot of meetings, I had a lot of visitors, FEMA, Army Corps of Engineers, governors, lieutenant governors, previous and current. And what we did is just show the issue. And because I worked third shift, my days were open. What I did learn is I probably should have communicated a little bit more with my wife before she looked out the window and saw 4 different news stations in the driveway. But, you know, it worked out well. And, you know, it's a lot of support, Debbie McCoy and Linda Tofalowski and Sandy Miller and Walter and the Williams. You know, we all came together, and there was a core of us that were always at the meetings and we're always advocating and, you know, really spreading the word and raising awareness, which I thought was important. So you know, Michelle, kudos to you from Massachusetts. I see you guys are gaining traction over there. Connecticut's made a lot of progress, you know, but we're going to need more funding. You know, the challenge has been and will always continue to be is funding. Federal funding, if we could get 300 million, 400 million, you know, that would get us, you know, continue to allow people in Connecticut to get their houses repaired. And also to Massachusetts needs to start getting fixed. And we're going to need more money. You know, Connecticut's bonded money plus the healthy home residents of Connecticut are paying for this. So the federal dollars, I really hope that comes through. So it's promising. That's basically all I really have to say. You know, it's just been a long road. It's been almost 6 years in July. And we still need some more money, and we're making progress. Mike McGlaris with the captive insurance and his team have done a remarkable job with reviewing applications, approving applications. So it's a team effort, and everybody's doing what they can to help, and it's working.
So, and Tim, you had your home repaired last year, almost a year ago to the day where your home was lifted.
Yeah, last June.
Do you want to share just a little bit of how that process works for people who maybe have that kind of on the horizon?
The process went well. You know, it was COVID. During COVID, it was the only good thing that happened last year was I got my house fixed. But it went relatively smooth. You know, because as I mentioned, I worked 3rd shift, so I was here every day, doing what I had to do and seeing if the guys needed anything from me. And you know, they did a really good job. You know, we had to rent a house that the contractor had available for us, which made it easy. But you know, it's an expense, you know, and it adds up, and I'm still doing things at the house, you know, where just because your house has got a new foundation doesn't mean it's back 100%. It's you know, you can either pay somebody to do some of the stuff or you can do it on your own, and there's still some things that I need to get done. And once the warmer weather comes, you know, you do it. You need patience.
Right.
So.
And Tim, are there any resources for people, you know, when you're having your home repaired, you're out for a short period of time, and sometimes it could be hard to find rentals for 3 months or 6 months.
There is. There's a Facebook page, and that's a great question because a lot of people need that resource to find not only a place to rent, but also a place to rent for short term, whether it's 2 months or 3 months. Laura and I were out of our house for 2 months. And the coalition has a Facebook page, rentals while repair, or I can't remember the exact Facebook page, but we could post a link to it with the video.
And I'll look that up and add it to my resource sheet.
Sure.
Okay, excellent. Does anyone have questions for Tim? You can put them in the chat or raise a hand. All right. Okay, let's move on to Professor Gorley of Bolton. Thanks, Professor Gorley, for joining us. And,
thanks for having me.
So you can bring us all the science.
Sure. Well, I don't know if I can bring all the science tonight, but
All
I
right.
do have some exciting sort of new science that we just recently presented at a conference. So I'm going to share my screen and show a few slides since what I have to say is somewhat visual. So just give me a second here, because at the moment, you know, we've been asked since we started doing testing about 3 years ago. Oh, I don't think you're seeing it yet.
We had you for a second.
Yeah. Everyone wants to know the big question is that, is there a safe level of pyrrhotite?
There we go.
And so we've been working hard at this to try to answer this question. And it's taken a while to get to this point because you really need a lot of data. You need a lot of homes throughout all the towns that have the issue, homes that don't have the issue. And so we're a little closer to answering this tonight, which is great. For more information about our testing method, and because I'm not going to get a bit of chance to get into all the science of this right now, but we've got a great website. And if you're into QR codes, you can scan it right now and pull it up on your smartphone. That'll be there in the bottom in case you want to check that out, because we have lots of questions that answer some of the science kind of end of pyrrhotite, how it behaves, what we know about it, what we don't know. But the short answer is we're getting closer. And let me just go through a couple slides here to sort of explain this. So this is all of the data that we've accumulated to date. And if you've actually done a test through us, you recognize this graph. If you don't, what it's showing are the two things that we measure to determine whether or not there's pyrrhotite in a home. The first thing we measure is the total sulfur content, and that is on the y-axis here. Pyrrhotite is a iron sulfide, and so knowing how much sulfur is in it is important. And as more pyrrhotite enters into the concrete, the sulfur value increases, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. And the other thing we measure is a physical measurement of essentially the iron in pyrrhotite. Pyrrhotite is magnetic, and my colleague Christoph Geis is a rock magnetist, and we have an instrumentation at Trinity that allows us to measure very small changes in magnetism when you heat up a sample, and pyrrhotite is a very unique signature for magnetism. And the amount of magnetism essentially due to pyrrhotite is being tracked on the x-axis here. And so they're very related to one another. As pyrrhotite increases in a home, the magnetic susceptibility increases and the sulfur concentration. I'm not going to get into the details of the magnetism, and I'm going to wait for that for some other time. And certainly I could happy to have a conversation with you, but this is a very important value. This magnetic susceptibility value is essentially tracking how much pyrrhotite is in concrete. And what we've noticed is that there is a level below which map cracking doesn't occur. So let me explain now these colors that are representing different homes we've looked at. The green squares are all the homes that either don't have any pyrrhotite in them, and those are the ones that hang along the origin right here, just along the y-axis. There's some homes that have a little bit of pyrrhotite, and they don't show any signs of deterioration. And then homes, as pyrrhotite increases, there are homes that either show signs of deterioration, which are the red dots, and homes that don't show signs of deterioration, which are the orange diamonds. And those are intermixed, and those are complicated because there are homes that are the same amount of pyrrhotite, and some homes have cracking, some don't have map cracking, some might in the future, some might not. But what we were looking for is there a level below which we never see map cracking? And so that's being the most visible evidence of the pyrrhotite problem is map cracking. And there is, it's actually right around 5 magnetic susceptibility loss units here. Now you'll notice that there is a couple points that hang over on the left side of this, and those are important just to point out because we always take 2 cores from a home. So if there was a home that had one value that say was 10 and another one that was 4, we're still going to mark it as essentially the worst case scenario of a home that does have pyrrhotite but no signs of deterioration. So after 430 plus homes now, we've really honed in on this very low level. But what does that mean, 5 magnetic susceptibility loss units? People want to know, what does that mean in terms of the amount of pyrrhotite? And so in order to figure that out, we need to understand the relationship between sulfur and pyrrhotite, because again, pyrrhotite's an iron sulfide. And so if we take all of our data, and if you remember putting best fit lines through data and creating an equation of a line, we can use that equation of a line to figure out, okay, with 5 magnetic susceptibility loss units, what does that equate to for sulfur? And it turns out it's 0.23% sulfur, okay? The problem is that clean concrete also has sulfur in it due to the cement portion in it. And so we've looked at all the homes that have clean concrete with no pyrrhotite in it and looked at what the sulfur content is. And so these are all the homes that we've looked at that are pyrrhotite free, and they range from about 0.08 to 0.2-ish with an average of 0.014 as being what's the most common and also the average percentage of sulfur that's in clean concrete. So we need to subtract that out to figure out what percentage of the sulfur is actually related to pyrrhotite, not due to other minerals. And so if we do that, we could subtract 0.14 out from that best fit line approximation of that 5 magnetic susceptibility units that equates to 0.203. And then we convert that sulfur to pyrrhotite. What we come out with is this important number. And so this is the one to focus on. 0.06% pyrrhotite by weight is what we believe is essentially the level at which, below which, you're not going to experience map cracking. Now, there are not that many homes that are below that level. There are a few, but they're not that many. But it's an important step because to this point, we really haven't gotten any clear indication as to whether or not there is a level that could be considered safe. There are some standards in Europe and Canada that have numbers that are close to this, which is encouraging, which says that, you know, from all of the work we've done so far, that we're honing in on essentially a level that would be considered to not cause problems. The problem, though, I see as that there are many homes that are above that level, but are still a low amount of pyrrhotite. And so if I just back up a few slides here to my main graph here, all of these homes that are in orange right here, these are all homes that are pyrrhotite present, no concrete deterioration reported. They're above this threshold level that I just sort of derived, but they don't show any signs of deterioration. Yet there are a few smatterings of homes that do. And so we can't rule out the possibility that there's some homes that could have problems at that particular concentration for whatever reason. But when we look at something called the predicted probability, looking at the statistics of all the homes we've looked at to date, there is this, as we increase magnetic susceptibility, which is on the x-axis here, the probability incrementally increases from that point. And so it's not as if at the low concentration, you're necessarily going to have cracking issues. The probability is actually fairly low. And as you increase in concentration, the probability gets higher. Now we can start adding in other factors as well, like the age of the house too, that can help adjust this to some bit, because the age of the house matters as well. A home that has the same amount of pyrrhotite in it from 1986 might not behave the same way as a home from 2005. And so we have to take those factors into account as well. But from our standpoint at the moment, the single most important variable in whether or not your home exhibits map cracking is how much pyrrhotite is in it. And we're measuring that again using this magnetic susceptibility value, and then using all of those values, being able to determine what the predicted probability would be from that. So we're working on this still. This is not done. This is still kind of hot off the press, but we're excited to talk about it because I think it does help put some things in perspective, especially those homes at those low end concentrations. Because again, in my view, those homes at the moment are the ones when someone asked about all the homes that, you're in line for SIGFIG, but you don't know where you are in line. That's because all those homes that have really bad issues are probably cutting the line because their homes are far worse off than these homes that don't show any signs of deterioration. So what to do with all of these homes, maybe hundreds, thousands of homes that could be in this boat. And that's where I feel, and I'll say it, and if there are any of our state reps are still on the call here too, the more we can look at these low end homes for the possibility of risk analysis for the sake of insuring these homes, I think we're going to help solve the problem for many homes that might not be needing to be the worst case scenario of getting lifted and might never show signs of significant deterioration, but people can't sell their houses at the moment because pyrrhotite is present. But there are low risk situations, and so why not get insurance companies to to essentially insure those homes, especially if they're low risk. So that's all I've got to say, Trish, and I'm more than happy to take questions at this point.
Okay, so I have a question here that asks, are all of those houses public information?
Are all of those houses public information? Individual houses, we would never make public, but when we test homes, we ask homeowners if they'd be willing to have their data part of our study. So we're not essentially going to be sharing all of our data on a per house basis, but anyone that essentially it does our testing that then asks for reimbursement for the testing, they send their report to the state. So the state is certainly collecting all that information. And so there is some level of publicness and disclosure because they are sending those results to the state for reimbursement. I hope that answers that.
Okay. So another, this is Robin from Representative Ash's staff. Does that mean that water moisture does not contribute to the deterioration of the concrete?
It certainly does. And that could be the reason why many of those points that are orange diamonds are not red dots yet, because the speed at which the deterioration occur can certainly have to do with water and moisture. Though it's complicated, it's not just a lot of moisture that's necessarily the worst case scenario. The pyrrhotite reaction needs both water and air. And so a supersaturated concrete might actually not deteriorate as fast as just humid concrete. And we live in a humid environment. And so the moisture can not just come in from the outside, but could actually penetrate the concrete from the inside as well. For most of us that run dehumidifiers in our basement, we know very well that it's quite wet in our basements. And it doesn't necessarily mean there's water moving in from the outside. So the water moisture question is certainly an important one. And that probably relates more to how fast certain concrete deteriorates over time, certainly. And that needs to be teased out to some degree.
And then also would it be for folks who have that that coating on the outside of their foundation that's below ground level, that would make a difference as well?
So, I mean, anecdotally, there are cases where people have had positive tests for pyrrhotite, they've had that coating and don't have any signs of deterioration. Anecdotally, there's cases where they do. And so, it's a combination of different factors. It might, in many cases, certainly slow the penetration of water. But again, water and air can get in from the inside as well. So it's not it's not going to necessarily fix everything. It could prolong deterioration over time. Yes.
Excellent. Okay, I've got another question for you. If a home is already a class 3 but has not been cored, are you interested in coring for your study?
I mean, we're always looking to add, 430 homes would be 1,000 homes would be better. So yes, we're always interested in more data for sure. It's interesting. The class 3 homes initially, we got a lot of, because when the program first got started up, all homes had to get tested. And then the state said, well, class 3 homes don't need to get core tested, which made sense because homes that were really bad off really didn't need to. It was obvious that they were had the issue. And so why go through that process? But so we did start essentially losing out on those data points of really bad homes, because most of those don't come our way for testing. It's usually the ambiguous ones, or where there's no signs, but people want to know if there's pyrrhotite in there, that are the ones we've been getting more so over the last couple of years.
Excellent. Let's see, does anyone else have a question for Professor Gorley? Oh, hold on. Oh, we've got, my understanding is that a finished basement where water and air are trapped behind wall vapor barrier is a cause of speeding deterioration. Is this correct? Finished basements are potentially worse.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely heard cases where essentially if concrete's trapped between a finished basement and then coating on the outside, like not allowing the concrete to breathe, essentially can be bad. We don't always see what totally finished basements look like because they're totally finished. And sometimes it's difficult to understand what the deterioration extent is in finished basements, but we've gotten peaks of it when people have pulled back the curtain, so to speak. But it can be a problem, yes. And I do see Lisa Burns, she's happy to submit her category 3. And so you should definitely reach out to me and we can discuss. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, and Professor Gourlay's contact information will be at the end of their frequently asked questions page. So so when you get the link, you can go right there. Thank you.
Looks like George has a question.
Oh, there we go. Let me unmute you, George.
There you go. Professor Gourlay, thank you. I think this, your research here from the very beginning has really pushed this forward. And this could be a game changer, certainly in the real estate market for a lot of people, as you continue researching it. So I hope that the state or the feds or anybody else may be able to assist you in this, because this can make a real big difference, especially for homeowners who may, especially in the later end, that 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, that may not be able to sell a house right now or have deals falling through because of it. Following up, I do have one question, because this was something we were told early on, but there's no way to determine it at the time, which is, and you had just kind of talked about it, that for sometimes the deterioration gets worse if that concrete is encapsulated. So if people don't know they have a crumbling foundation, is it true that if they skim coat it, if they cover it, that potentially could expedite this process? Is that something that you're still seeing now as you research more? I know part of the things that we heard at the beginning where we didn't know for sure was if it was just that once it was encapsulated, you didn't see the deterioration until it actually cracked through. But are you noticing at all that it gets worse if it's encapsulated, if it's skim coated and covered?
Well, it's hard for us to answer if it's gotten worse because we only see it the day that it was poured, right? But we do encounter a lot of homes that get skim coated. And often the ones that are really bad, the skim coating has already cracked. And so it was obviously, trying to cover up something that was already a problem. And then you see cracking in the skim coating that gives a clue to the fact that it's continued on. So, but it's hard to know. The whole time factor and speed for any given home is really hard, without time-lapse cameras set up in all of these homes, or having constant contact with homeowners. And a lot of, honestly, a lot of the things that we're doing are during the course of home sales. And so the home is changing ownership too. And so what the homeowner before knew doesn't necessarily get carried over to what the new homeowner knows. And so it's very difficult to sort of track these sort of progress. I mean, I have had anecdotal stories of homeowners literally watching cracks grow across their basement over the course of weeks and months by tracking it with chalk. And we recommend that if people see any cracks at all that they're suspect of, to mark it with chalk so that they can see if it's grown maybe an inch over the next month or two.
Sure.
So, but it's hard to know, especially when things are covered up, on how extensive things are accelerated.
We had heard from a lot of contractors over time that it looks like it's going to sink down, as it kind of bows down from the roof in a basement. And so they'll put temporary columns up, and it actually lifts the house up. And so it'll be the middle of the night after 3 or 4 months of having those columns, and they'll hear a crash. And it's because the house is no longer sitting on the columns. And so that's wild, unbelievable work. I know you've been doing it. Have you had a chance to look at some of the homes that you tested, say in 2016, and then look at them 3-4 years later to see if it increases or if there's speed? Has there been any research like that to determine if homes are getting worse?
I mean, we always ask that if a homeowner wants to call us up and tell us something's changed, we encourage them to do so. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten those calls yet. So
sure.
Yeah.
Great work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's see.
Another hand up?
Yep, so let me go ahead and ask you to unmute. So that's Sang Ah. Okay, go ahead with your question. Oh, all right, let me ask you to unmute again.
There
Okay,
you
can
go.
you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Actually, I'm from Shoreline, but I have some clients who wanna, purchase house in Vernon, Glastonbury, that area. My question is that I see some new trend on MLS, listing agent, they have new trend that upload a lot of documents, not the scientific report, but saying that, okay, the seller spent a lot of money hiring a engineering company. They did a visual inspection according to the letter. There is no, I don't know how to say, the parrot and all that. So this foundation looks to me, it's kind of vague. How convince this kind of letters believable? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well,
yeah.
They're problematic because, I mean, an engineer that does a visual inspection, if there's a problem, can identify it pretty easily. The problem is an engineer can't identify if pyrrhotite is in a foundation if cracking hasn't started yet. It doesn't mean it's going to start just because it has pyrrhotite. I want to be clear about that, but it can be a little misleading if they say, oh, everything looks okay. But if you don't actually know if there's pyrrhotite in there, you don't know for sure that it will be looking okay next year, or in 5 years or in 10 years. So doing a core test is really the only way to know for sure if there's pyrrhotite in there. Now, again, it's not always, if we find pyrrhotite in there, we don't necessarily know what it means for the future, unfortunately. We can only give you, again, sort of, well, this is what all the other houses in that sort of realm have done, which is helpful, but it doesn't give you a definitive answer of the future, which, I mean, I know everyone would love to know if given any test result, what does it mean for the future? And unfortunately, that's probably the hardest thing. I mean, we might never be able to do that.
I see. Then I have a second question. Another one is that, for example, okay, this house was built by a builder who used local concrete company, not the one who caused problem. How do I convince my buyer that don't worry when you make an offer? You know what I mean? Because I have no tricks to convince the documentation at all to provide it.
Well, again, a core test is going to be the most definitive way to know for sure. It's not out of the realm of possibility that there are other potential homes that have pyrrhotite that didn't come out of the problem quarry. There's evidence to suggest that might be possible. It's probably the exception, not the rule at the moment. And there's certainly, there are trace levels of pyrrhotite through a lot of rocks through New England. So even on the shoreline, for example, we have found homes that have trace levels of pyrrhotite. They've all been below that kind of threshold value. And if it was a problem in other places, we'd probably see more of it because we would have more homes that were having cracking issues in different places. So certainly the focus of the problem is up here in north central Connecticut, and having aggregate from different places does matter for sure. But you're right, it's hard to convince buyers to know for sure exactly where their material comes from. But again, testing it is the easiest way to determine whether or not whether it's there or not.
Okay, thank you.
And Megan O'Sullivan had some information to share with us.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add, and thank you for the presentation, that Congressman Courtney and the other federal members of the Connecticut delegation and Massachusetts delegation have worked to get federal funding for the National Institute of Standards and Technology to research this question as well. So we're happy to share information on that. And we have requested a briefing from NIST. I think it's next week or the week after, but feel free to have the leadership of this group follow up with our office, and we'd be happy to send you some information about that as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's great. Thank you so much, Megan. Does anyone else have any questions for Professor Gourley? Okay, thank you so much, John.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. So we have Michelle Loglisi from Massachusetts Residents Against Crumbling Concrete. And so Michelle is going to share what's happening in Massachusetts.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for including us this evening. We're fairly new to the game compared to most of you in Connecticut. Personally, my husband and I found out we had this problem in December of 2017. And the more we looked at it and the more we researched, we realized we had really nowhere to turn but to go to our government representatives and say, what's going on? This is happening to us. Have you heard this from other people? And of course, they were telling us right off the bat, be very careful. Don't put a lot of money into your home. You're going to need it because, it's very expensive to have this done. And we just started talking to others. And before you knew it, we had a group of people that were affected. And like Tim, we decided that we needed to start advocating for ourselves because without that, we weren't going to get anywhere. And that's when I met them, met Tim, met Debbie and the others from Connecticut and learned so much from them. So we started advocating and we formed our group in June of 2018 to begin trying to advocate for ourselves. We had a forum in September of that year, and we've just been building on that, and more people have been coming forward to get tested and try to get some numbers in Massachusetts. That has been our biggest challenge, is for residents to come forward. I'm sure that, Connecticut felt the same growing pains at the beginning where most people didn't really want to know about this. I've actually had people tell me, stop talking to me. I don't want to know, which is unfortunate because unless we get out there and show the numbers that are affected, we were afraid that nothing would happen for us. But we've been very lucky. Our local legislators, Representative Brian Ash and Senator Lesser and Senator Goby and Representative Smola from our Hampden County, Hampshire County area and Worcester County have really worked for us to try to get Massachusetts in line and following Connecticut's lead. Thank you to everyone from Connecticut, all the representatives from Connecticut for helping our legislators get up to speed. They've shared all their information. That's been very helpful. At this point, what we're seeing in Massachusetts is a couple of things. We're expanding this issue into Worcester County more and more. And it's very concerning that we are now in many towns up in that area, and our map is expanding and growing, and the Massachusetts towns that are affected are getting close to the same as Connecticut, unfortunately. So our advocacy has been mostly Facebook based. We've started a homeowners group so that we can meet by Zoom meeting like this to plan things and to share information with each other. Our Facebook page is Massachusetts Residents Against Crumbling Concrete, if anyone would like to join us. And right now in Massachusetts, we have pending legislation we are hoping will get us somewhere this year. It includes things such as quarry standards and waivers of permit fees for folks who are actually going through the process of getting the work done themselves. Because some people, as we know, cannot wait for funding to come through. They have to get the work done as soon as possible. We have in this legislation seller disclosures, which I think is important. I think it's a first step in that area where sellers will have to disclose to any home buyer if they're aware of issues with their foundation. I'd like to see personally something like what Massachusetts has for septic systems. It's called the Title V law, where the septic system has to pass before the house can be sold. And I'd like to see something like this core testing being required for homes in this area in this time frame, because I think buyers are really not protected at the moment. I mean, unless the realtor is watching for it or the home appraiser is aware of it, you're not going to know, especially homes that are built more in the last 10, 15 years. This also includes a property tax abatement language that will not limit the time frame. Right now, the towns in Massachusetts that are allowing tax abatement are limiting it to 5 years. But you all know in Connecticut, that doesn't necessarily get you to a home that's back to its original condition and worth what it used to be. So that takes that time frame out of it if it passes this way, which we are hopeful for. But most importantly, in my opinion, is that this legislation, if passed, will allow for a captive insurance company to operate in Massachusetts. We currently don't have that ability, and we need that, just as you did. So we're really hoping that that will pass. So what I am asking Massachusetts residents who are listening or get to see this recording to do is exactly what Congressman Courtney said: get active, contact your legislators. I will have shared and will share again on our Facebook page simple links to a list of all of our Massachusetts legislators where you can get their email address or phone number, and you can contact them and let them know your concerns. Even if you're not an affected homeowner, maybe you are in a neighborhood where there are other affected homes and now it's affecting your home value. So please reach out, let them know that this is an important issue that they need to support. And that's kind of where we're at right now. I'm just asking for people to step up. That would be our biggest move forward, I think.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing, Michelle. And it's so wonderful to hear that there's progress being made in Massachusetts for the homeowners who are affected.
And we are so thankful for our legislators. Without them, we'd be lost.
You know, we've got Robin here from Representative Ash's staff. Did you want to share anything?
Right. Good evening. Yes, I would. First, I want to thank you for allowing us to participate in this, and the invaluable information and support that Connecticut, Tim, Congressman Courtney and his staff have provided has been invaluable. I've contacted Congressman Courtney's office several times, and they've been very, very helpful and been able to assist with so much information, because the details that we don't have yet, you guys have. And fortunately for us, unfortunately for you, we get to follow your lead, because you guys have done a phenomenal job. And Michelle, don't underestimate what you have done as well. You've been a big supporter to all the homeowners across the state. It does appear that Massachusetts, it was more from the legislative standpoint, it was more the education piece of it that we needed to get across to the legislature, because so many, you know, in the eastern part of the state, there's 2/3 of the population in Massachusetts. So when Western Mass has something going on, it's only 1/3 of the population, and they don't really hear about it or they don't know about it. And it kind of gets swept under the rug sometimes. But now that it's moving closer and closer to Central Mass, and we're finding more and more homes, and Senator Goby, Senator Lesser, and my boss, Representative Ash, have done a great job at really promoting this issue throughout the legislature. So when it first came about, it was a bit of a puzzlement to a lot of legislatures. They weren't really sure, you know, what was involved, and, you know, should they support it, and how much of a problem was it? But now they're learning that it's becoming a larger and larger problem, and they're now aware of what Connecticut has done. So they see that there is a process in place. So I think that gives them a little bit more comfort in knowing that, okay, we do have a direction we can go in. So I'm really hoping that this session, this bill can go to the very end, and we can get moving on what we need to do, because like Michelle said, a lot of homeowners were not coming forward, but now more and more people are coming forward, because I think they realize there's not just, you know, 50 people involved. There could be hundreds and hundreds of homes. And I just heard that there may possibly be an entire neighborhood in the Central Mass area that's involved. So I'm hoping that we can share your stories, and we can use you as an example and say that, you know, if you do come forward, the state will support you, and hopefully the federal government will come through with more money. And the more comfortable people feel with that, to know that there is hopefully a solution and that people are behind them, the more they'll come forward. But I do just want to thank you all again for everything that you've done for us, and you've been a great support. And Tim has done a great job at advocating and getting the message across and showing what you need to do to get this solution. So I thank you again, and hopefully we can all look back on this fairly soon and know that it was taken care of, and we won't have the issue anymore. But I appreciate you allowing us to participate.
Excellent. Thank you. So So there's two things. One thing I wanted to tie on with what you just said. I did have someone who's a homeowner who has an issue reach out to me. I think it was maybe a year ago, and just said that they felt embarrassed or as if they had done something wrong, which no one who has this issue has done something wrong. So I hope now, in seeing all these other people and hearing the stories, that this will help people, as you just said, feel comfortable coming forward. That's great. Professor Gorley, I missed a question. I was going back through the chat to make sure I didn't miss one, and I did. The question was, how does your testing compare with other testing?
So there are a couple of different ways to test for pyrrhotite. I would say the more traditional way, I guess, is using petrography, which essentially you take a core, you slice it really thin, and you look under a microscope and you look for pyrrhotite visually. And this can be done really well with a well-trained geologist who can recognize the optical properties of minerals and is quite good at being able to distinguish pyrrhotite from other sulfur minerals, which isn't easy. It's time consuming, but if someone's trained to do it, they can do it quite well. The problem is you're literally looking for pyrrhotite needles in a haystack. And so when there's a lot of pyrrhotite, it's easy to estimate, okay, there's so much pyrrhotite in the aggregate. It's usually done as a percentage of how many pieces of aggregate have pyrrhotite in it. So the whole thing could be pyrrhotite, or just a couple flecks could be pyrrhotite. It doesn't do a good job of quantifying how much pyrrhotite is there by weight. But it's totally effective at being able to identify pyrrhotite. It is more time consuming because of the kind of work that it is. Whereas our test is, again, two different tests, if one physical, one chemical. We don't get to look at the actual mineral assemblage and grains because we crush up the sample into a powder to do our analysis for total sulfur and for the magnetics. So we get a really good, especially at the low level, precision as to how much pyrrhotite is in there. But the interaction of pyrrhotite is with other minerals and how pyrrhotite is arranged with other minerals when the aggregate is somewhat lost because we don't see that. So we're really good at measuring it, especially at low levels, but describing the rest of the rock is not something we're able to do, whereas the petrographer can describe more of the rest of the rock, and they can see pyrrhotite essentially disintegrating at the micro level. If it's disintegrating at the macro level, I mean, that's sort of already known. So they are different, but they're both effective at being able to determine if pyrrhotite is in a sample. I do question at the very low end of the spectrum, the one that we can do pretty well, how well petrographers are able to consistently be able to determine how much pyrrhotite is at that low level. But when we've had the opportunity to exchange samples with petrographers, when they find it high, we find it high. When they find it low, we find it low. So it's comparable.
And Professor Gurley, can you also just explain to people what happens when pyrrhotite has reacted?
Sure. So the reaction actually breaks down pyrrhotite and turns it into new minerals. So the reaction happens with pyrrhotite in the presence of water and air, quickly turning into sulfuric acid that then combines with the cement in the concrete and forms other sulfate minerals like gypsum and another one called ettringite. And those minerals are larger in volume. And so you start with one volume of pyrrhotite and then you essentially expand it to a larger mineral like gypsum and ettringite. And so the concrete expands from the inside out. And you need water and air to be able to get that reaction to go.
So once there's been a reaction, if the pyrrhotite has reacted, would it then, is there still any pyrrhotite, or would it test?
If it all reacts, no, it's not pyrrhotite anymore. However, in the worst case, we've never encountered a home that looks completely disintegrated that doesn't still have at least some aggregate that has pyrrhotite in it. So it's yes, in theory, if all of it were to react, then then you would no longer have purotite and you wouldn't be able to identify it. But that is yet to happen because there's still always some more in there somewhere usually.
Great. And so, Tim, I don't know if you saw, but there's a comment in the chat for you that said you were out at their house in Ellington over 3 years ago. They thank you for all your efforts, and their house is getting lifted this Wednesday. Congratulations. It would
Thank
not
you.
have been possible without you and everyone helping advocate for us victims.
Thank you for the kind words. And Trish, just real quick, I wanted to add to what Robin had said earlier. You know, what us here in Connecticut, to raise awareness, we found that was beneficial was testifying on bills that were being submitted. One time we testified in front of 3 committees, and that was dozens and dozens of homeowners and affected the victims, just telling their stories in front of everybody on the committees. That was very helpful as far as raising awareness. So you guys might want to allow or try to get some testimony in front of the legislators.
And I actually have one question, if it's all right, for Michelle. Michelle, has the insurance department put any protections in place in Massachusetts for homeowners who do come forward?
Not that I am aware of. Robin, are you aware of anything?
Hold on one second. Let me just unmute her.
And the only reason I'll ask is as she
Okay.
gets,
No, I'm not yet. I know we've had some, when the commission was formed, which Michelle was part of, and my boss and Senator Goby, we did meet with some insurance people, and there was talk that they were going to take a look at that, but they haven't done anything yet. So that is one thing that we will be addressing. We're trying to get in touch with, like NAFA for the insurance piece of it, try to see what we can do, what we can work with them on, but nothing has been done yet. And Tim, to answer your question, this bill that was just filed, we just had put our committees together. So when it gets moved into a committee, every bill has to have a hearing. So
Right.
we're hoping to have a hearing sooner than later.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can get it moved into committee quickly and get a hearing. But like you said, that takes a lot of advocacy, and you really have to push for it to make sure it gets moved out quickly. But we and Michelle knows that we are prepared that when it does have a hearing, they're going to have a full hearing and a full, there won't be an empty seat. Yeah, there won't be an empty seat. And like I said, the education piece for the legislation was really, a lot of the legislators knew nothing about it. So I think the first time it was filed, it was a learning experience for them. But now we've gone through it for one session, and they've been, they've asked their questions and they've been made aware of it. So I think it's not that it's going to be an easy sell, but I think it's going to be a little bit easier because now they understand what the problem is, but also it doesn't just affect a small amount of people. It could affect the entire state, and we just don't know yet. So I think hopefully it's going to be it'll be discussed much more in depth, I think, when it comes before the legislation. But we are planning hopefully to have a hearing sooner than later. So we're pushing for that.
Good.
I can tell you personally, I have emailed every single Mass State Senator and Representative for that, and some of them more than once. And
don't stop, Michelle.
Don't stop, Michelle.
Don't stop.
And my purpose in doing this and the emails that I send, I started with the people who represent the area that's affected, so that my email to them and the pictures that I shared with them, I could talk about it affecting their constituents, the people that they represent. And then I moved out from there to people across the state that aren't in an area that we know to be affected at this point, because we need their support as well. So when I ask Massachusetts residents to email legislators, I don't mean to email Representative Ash or Senator Goby, because they're well aware of it and they are advocating for us. I am asking you to help us educate every other senator and representative who's not in this area and hasn't heard of pyrrhotite before, so that they understand the issue when it comes in front of them.
Michelle, when I worked in Washington, D.C., I worked on this for about 6 months in Connecticut, then was in D.C. for 2 years. And one of the stations that I covered in DC was Fox 25 in Boston. And so we did a story about this problem being in Massachusetts back in 2016. And I spoke to Elizabeth Warren about it. She knows me as a Crumbling Foundations guy. Every time she saw me in the hallway and Markley, I would bring it up. And so I would say, just keep bringing that up to the lawmakers. And where I got to the question about the insurance protecting you, I think that was the biggest thing that got things off the ground here in Connecticut. That in order to get people to truly feel comfortable to stand up and to speak out and to go to the hearings and to lay it on the line, they need to know that they're not going to get their insurance pulled the next time there's a renewal. And so the insurance department came out, even though there were a lot of fights here in Connecticut with the insurance department, they did come out and protected the homeowners right off the bat. And by the time a few months went by, and we did the first story in July, it was just before Thanksgiving when 1,000 people showed up in an auditorium that opened everybody's eyes up. At that point, it was basically Joe Courtney and a few of the local lawmakers that were really on board. Everyone else was against it. But if you could get a first step of having that insurance commissioner protect the homeowners for speaking out, for saying they have the problem so they can get the numbers and get a better idea, I think that could be a huge step for people to feel comfortable coming forward. That's the only reason I brought it up. It's not talked a lot about anymore when we talk about the process we went into Connecticut, but without the governor acknowledging it really early on and calling for an investigation and having his insurance commissioner lay those protections in place so you couldn't be harmed, you couldn't have your insurance pulled, that was a big difference for everybody. And it's not necessarily remembered now, but I'm not sure we ever get to step 2 or step 3 if that didn't happen. So I know that it's a nitty-gritty thing, but it may make a big difference if the insurance commissioner can acknowledge it and protect those homeowners to get everybody outside the states, outside the area, to start paying attention. Great job, Michelle.
Thank you, George. Thank you.
And to tie in to what George just said, Gretchen posted in Connecticut, the insurance commissioner wrote the letter to insurers saying they could not drop for this issue. No legislation needed, just boom.
Put out yeah, I mean, that's what it was. It was a guidance. If we need to find out the numbers here, insurance, part of the problem that keeps it quiet and kept it quiet for 20 years in Connecticut was that if you said you had this problem or you filed a claim, you then got denied and they wouldn't renew you. And you get put into that system and all of a sudden you kind of have a black mark on insurance. It was a really, really, really important step here. And so I only bring that up, not to scare anybody, but if you're looking at the efforts that could make a big difference to get others paying attention, I really think that was probably the biggest thing to protect homeowners here in Connecticut at the very beginning to let it keep going.
All right, so we're getting close to the end of our time here. So I have one more comment or question rather, and then someone who's going to share another meeting about Crumbling Foundations with everyone. So this is from Charlie. At the Connecticut level, where are the numbers found, homes affected, towns, and what's currently coming down the pike on funding actions? Well, Congressman Courtney talked a little bit about that. But at the Connecticut level, where are the numbers found, homes affected? Professor Gorley, can you maybe talk to that a little bit?
I saw that question and I anticipated it.
Fantastic.
So I thought this would be the best way to show. This is an older map from CROG. Unfortunately, they don't have it updated. It's from 2018, but this gives a good indication, at least where the towns are. The problem quarry is in Willington. And so, if you're building a house and getting material from that quarry, you're only going to drive so far, and that did include over the border. So, this sort of bullseye extends over the Massachusetts border into South Central Massachusetts. These numbers are much higher now because this is updated 9/26/2018. So I don't know by how much, but this is at least what CROG is reporting. There might be a better site. I just pulled this up quick because I knew where to find it, but that sort of shows where the problem is. And if anyone else has better numbers, feel free to chime in.
Would that be found on CIFSIC website, this information?
Oh, that was the CROG website. So that's the Capital Region Council of Governments. But is there the SIGFIG website have a better one?
The information that this gentleman is asking for, would that be found on the CIFSIC site?
It might be if they track that and report that on a regular basis. But I think that's probably information that Trish is going to share with everybody too for other links that people can go to.
Yes, there will be a link to that site as well. And so Sarah Porras, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yes, thanks so much. Yeah. Hi, Trish. Thanks for letting me have a second here. I'm a local attorney and I help homeowners who have foreclosure issues and most other personal financial crises. And I give a seminar every semester through Vernon Adult-Based Education. It happens to be tomorrow night, 6:30. I'll give you the link here if you'd like to register, and then you'll be sent a Zoom link to participate just like this. And it's for homeowners who have mortgages and have questions about what to do, because not everybody is in for the long haul with the fix and all of that, and they see their home values dropping. And I want to just give people hope. This is a great seminar for real estate agents as well, home inspectors, home appraisers, anyone with a Crumbling foundation. It's mostly geared towards Connecticut residents, but Massachusetts residents are certainly welcome to tune in to get some ideas. And it's again tomorrow night, March 30th at 6:30. I thought I had one other thing to say, but I'll let you go. Thanks so much.
Where is it, Sarah? Is it a Zoom call or is
It's
it?
a Zoom. Yes,
Okay.
It's going to be this format, and I'll record it. So register whether you can attend or not, and then you'll get the link because I'll send the link out to everybody who registered after the fact.
Excellent. Nice to see you.
Thanks, Tim. So glad you posted this in the Summers Forum. Thanks to everybody for putting this together tonight.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for coming. It's been great to hear the information everyone's been able to share. And I want to specifically thank our speakers, Congressman Courtney, Tim Heim, Professor Gorley, and Michelle Iglesi. Just having this forum where people can ask questions and again, know that they're not alone. That's tremendous. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Trish.
Thank you,
Nice to
Trish.
see everybody.
You're
Have a
welcome.
good night.
Keep an
Good
eye
night,
out for
everyone.
that link.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.